Hey, Klotz here, and welcome to my breakdown of Sell My Soul featuring Roughwork, my favorite track on my Trials EP. This one honestly was the one that I had the most fun creating, partially because of the environment and partially just because I love the way it turned out. But also, I think just the grooviest one I've ever made, or one of the grooviest tracks I've ever made. It's just enjoyable to listen to. So I will play a bit of the build-up, make sure that the video is properly demonetized, and then I will roll into how I made the sounds.
Father said to me, always lock the door. Mother begged to me, crying on the floor, eaten by the flame. It began to call as I saw my name etched upon the wall. I was burning up, you were cold inside. I was terminal, they were terrified. Shatter everything, rob me of my sight. Give me everything, give me everything.
So as you can see, a very roller Z drum and bass tune. We start off with these lovely, lovely horns. And these are some Omnisphere horns, as you can see here. Let me pull up the preset. Usually with Omnisphere, I find that I don't need to tweak the preset that much in Omnisphere. Any processing I usually do outside of Omnisphere, just in Ableton. But we have early chromophonic pad 1. So where that is. I thought it was a nice little horn, so I add some compression to keep them. There was a lot of dynamic range. So I add some compression, a bit of reverb. Starts higher in the beginning and then comes in. This MIDI we just placed out, and then a saturator to make sure they don't clip as usual. That is layered with this guy, which filter sweeps in. And then underneath that we have a choir. So it's important to mention sort of how this song came about. This song was actually started at an event I host called Producer Lab, where I invite a bunch of producers from the region out to my place, and we all sit right here and work on tracks together and compare stuff we're working on and share ideas and do collabs and, you know, etc., etc. And it usually lasts about 8 to 10 hours, usually more like 10 to 11 hours. This track was actually started at a Producer Lab, and so that's how it ended up featuring Roughwork. He had these vocals sitting on his computer. And I'm not going to go into how he made his vocals, because I got them from him, created like this.
Father said to me, always lock the door. Mother begged to me, crying on the floor, eaten by the flame.
But as you can see, there's 4 layers to the different, to the vocals, so that he can pull off these different chords. So we get this sort of build up with all of those strings and the horns. Same thing with Dracula, if you've seen that video that I did, where I'm just trying to create a background atmosphere and a sort of vibe, this sort of like futuristic city at night vibe for the vocals to sit on top of. I don't want to make anything take attention away from the vocals at this point. I'm just trying to create an atmosphere for those. So the sub builds up with the rest of the track, but again, super minimal. There's not that much going on. There's just some drums and these horns. And then the drop, we really only add one sound, and it's this one. So this sound is a standardish Reese, to be honest. It's just some saw waves, very wide and very detuned, no FMing or anything, a bit of distortion, and then some compression. So the saw waves on their own. super crackly and nice and wide, but the atmosphere I'm going for is very backgroundy. That's what I want out of this. So I throw them in trash, make them a little grosser. A bit more distortion, but the important thing with trash is that I'm convolving it just a little bit. And I'll turn this up so you can hear what the convolve sounds like. Just adding the tiniest amount of that to the mix to give it a little more texture and make it less just these are saws and more interesting, I suppose. Saturated a fair amount, throw some fab filter on there, and here's where it gets deep. I really just take pretty much all the highs out. So it's a wide bell and then a curve as well. So we've low passed this sound. It sounds super minimal now. And then we also have a multi-band compressor in these regions for the ARP for later. When we introduce the ARP, it's going to need some of these frequencies. So we have this sound just duck when those frequencies come in. That layered on top of pretty much just the drums. There's really nothing else for this section. So sort of standard kick snare. The toms are a little interesting. So I've massively high passed the toms. We have them here a little bit sped up. Compressed them a ton with a little bit of a quick attack and a really fast release so that you just get the transients. Just a little click click from the toms. And then I have them panned as well really fast so that they don't always sit in the middle. I just wanted some stuff swirling around, you know, while this is sort of droning pad going on in the background. So when you put that all together, the shaker just takes a little break for the snare, because they both exist in the high end, and I like the sort of push pull between the shaker and the snare. So when you combine all that, and then you make sure that your Reese is drifting from note to note instead of cutting from note to note, you can hear it glide a little bit. So I let that go on for a long time, and then I add these horns, which are very lovely and pretty, and I would like to use them again someday because I enjoy how they sound. But these horns are also quite simple. It's two saw-ish sounds. I didn't even use this. Just some reverb and some EQ. Throw a bunch more reverb on it. So we multi-band compress the highs a little bit so that they're not too harsh when the saws actually hit, but then as the reverb tails out, it brings the highs up a little bit. It makes it a little sparklier. And then just EQ to taste and EQ to taste, again with the multiple EQs. If you've seen my other videos, I talk about this a lot. And then at the end, we bring the vocals back in, but we take the main ones out. We just have the high, mid, and low layers of the vocals. So instead of the full,
Beg to me, crying on the floor.
We just get,
Father said to me, always lock the door. Mother begged
and
to
you'll
me,
notice in the far
crying
right, I
on
don't know
the
if you can
floor.
see here, we do have them panned a little bit, so the voices are coming out of different speakers, and then one of them even moves back and forth between the speakers, so it gives it a lot wider of an atmosphere. It makes it sound like whoever's making these voices is standing around you.
Father said to me, always lock the door. Mother begged to me, crying on the floor, eaten by the flame. It began to call as I saw my name etched upon the wall.
The other thing we do for the back half of the drop is instead of making these one-shot horns, we make them continuous, and we bring up the low end a little bit. So you can hear it here. And then back to a one shot, nice long reverb. We up the reverb to 25 seconds just to let it echo out, because again, we're just trying to make a background. Not you, Alexa, no. Bring these horns and some strings.
Sorry, something went wrong.
This is actually a pretty interesting one as well. So we have everyone in the room, right? And I'm sort of messing with how I want to go with this. And actually, originally, this was like a euphoric hardstyle tune. Obviously, that didn't pan out, but that was what the original plan was. Maybe I'll make a version like that someday. But there are some analog synths in the room, and Roughwork busts his out, plugs it in, and just starts messing around in the same key. And so I'm like, hold on. If you're going to do that, let me record it. And so I record this completely dry. Fantastic. So I'm like, we're using that for sure. I duplicate it, pitch it down an octave, and cut out some of the highs so that the original can take up all of the space in the highs. So that when you stack them, it's more full. And then I do it again. I take it down another octave, boost the lows, and cut all the highs out. And again, reduce the volume. Just to fill out the low end a bunch. Throw some reverb exclusively on the high end, and then just make sure that nothing gets too loud in the highs. Here with a multiband compressor, cut out the super lows, and yeah, we have a little synth solo. Oh, right when it comes in, the highs are really harsh, because there's not a lot of highs going on here. So what I do is cut out the highs and then slowly bring them back in, so you can watch that happen. And they do their little synth solo, and then we go right into the horns again. So this is a nice little pluck. It's pretty simple. It's just a saw wave and a triangle wave with a little bit of a low pass filter on it, but not all the way. And then an arpeggiator to just make it play the chords instead of playing the whole chord. Super saw rack, some reverb saturation, and then more reverb, and an EQ to make sure it's not fighting anything else, and another multiband compressor to tame the highs down. A lot of the sounds were having issues in the highs for this track. So, doing that, we bring this back, bring the vocals back as well for the build-up, and then I wanted the drop to be a lot more present. If the first one was pretty minimal and dark, I wanted it to be a lot more there. So I amped up this a little bit, the trash, the Reese. So that's a little more aggressive, but the main thing is I keep the ARP during the drop and I speed it up to, 48ths. So it's playing those notes over the rest of it, and you still have these horns. So when you combine everything, it feels a lot faster. Oh yeah, and we had a ton of percussion. So we now have double kicks in here. We've got this repeating ride. We've got a lot more hi-hats, and the shaker is continuous. And one thing that I did that is totally unnecessary, but I just thought it was fun, was I made all the percussion play the melody. So you can see here I have a resonator, and they're each on different notes, and I turn them on and off. So I make them play the F and then 3, down 5, down 1 from the F, so that all of the percussion just has a little bit of a peak in whatever note the rest of the song is meant to be playing right now. I don't think that's the kind of thing that anyone will ever notice, but I was just having fun making it, so I put that in there. So when we combine all of those elements, the more exciting drums and the ARP, we get a much more driving second drop. And then the most chaotic part of the entire song, which is in my opinion the best part, I bring these horns back to full like they were in the first drop. I leave the ARP and I add a note in the chord so it is not cycling evenly anymore. And I bring the vocals back in again without the main one and with the panning that we were doing earlier. Because the track is so energetic at this point, and it's nominally such a moody, darker track, I bring it all the way down to just the horns and the one string here, and then the sub. And then we have the sax solo, and the sax solo is a great story. This, I'll play it for you in full over here. What happened was one of my roommates came home from work and had to go to band practice, but he saw what we were working on and he said something saxophone, and I was like, oh yes, please. He goes and grabs his saxophone, comes into the room, he's like, okay, play the track again, or you hear what key it is, and blah 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 blah. I play a bit for him and he goes, okay, I know what to do. And I just hit record, and one take he busts this solo out and then runs to his room because he's late for band practice. So within the 2 minutes that he was around, he actually wrote for part of this track. So you can hear it here with no reverb and delay, just dry as it was. You can actually hear him at the end go, okay, do something with that, and then he leaves the room. So what we did was we add a bunch of reverb and a little bit of delay to make it nice and pretty and clean. And then we also duplicated it and brought it down an octave just to give it a little more body, same thing we did with the synth. And so we take out pretty much everything except for these background strings and the sub, and we just let the sax ride over it, and then at the end just a little bit of white noise sweep to fill it out and, signify that the end of the track has arrived. That's the whole thing. This is another one of those where I tried to take minimal elements and really fill out a lot of space in the track by creating an atmosphere. It's not the kind of track that you listen to and you think, oh my god, what is happening? But it's the kind of track that you can put on and like close your eyes or drive at night and just sort of absorb the atmosphere and the feelings that it's trying to portray. At least I hope it is. That's what I was going for when I wrote it. This is my favorite track on the EP because I think it's the most fun to just listen to. I think that it portrays what it's trying to portray extremely well, and I had a lot of fun making it. I got to work with some people that I really like working with. So hopefully you learned something about how I make a little bit of rollery drum and bass, and hopefully you make some, and you should send it to me. I love hearing tracks like this, so if you end up working on anything similar to this, definitely send it over to me. If you want to know how I made the rest of the tracks on the Trials EP, I'm making videos for those as well. They will be down in the description or on the screen right now. And, feel free to hit me up on any social media if you want me to make videos on anything else in particular, or if you have more questions about this, or if you just want to connect, let me know. Until then.